Good morning. Let the record reflect Commissioners Johnson, Sobroff, Figueroa Villa, Kim, and Salzman are present, and we have a quorum. Number 1 on the agenda, consent agenda items 1A through 1F.
Do we have any comment on any of these items?
No, sir.
Would any of my...
Approval, I'm sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
Approval of items 1A through 1F.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All those items move. Thank you.
We're now on item number 2, commission comments.
Do any of my fellow commissioners have any comments this morning? I just want to note, last week we had the department's 2015 use of force report. We will be bringing that back on the agenda on April 12th to give everyone ample opportunity to review the longer version of the report, which almost 300 pages. So that will be back on the agenda April 12th for us to have our additional questions and comments, and also for the public to have digested the material as well and come back with their questions and comments. Mr. Inspector General, can you give us an update on your use of force report, as well as the less than lethal report and the audit and report of the 5 large agencies of their policies and procedures?
Definitely, Commissioner. Our review of the department's policies and trainings related to use of force, that 10-year review, should be at Commission open session next week. I expect that the less than lethal report that you've asked for will be ready by mid-April. And we still have some scheduling issues with some of the departments that we're going to visit and reviewing some of their training and use of force systems. But I still expect that that'll be done sometime in early June.
Great, thank you. Have you visited all 5 departments yet, or how many have we visited so far?
We have visited 2 departments. We're set to go to 2 others in the next coming weeks, and probably have one. The final one will probably be in April sometime.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other commissioner questions or comments? Do we have any comment, public comment?
Yes, sir. We have 2 comment cards. We have Prentice Jenkins and Melina Abdullah. Mr. Jenkins.
Which one are we on?
Commissioner comments.
Commissioner comment. Participation, meetings, ceremony, events. Relative to participation here in the meetings and the brief reports identifying of involvement in commission-related projects. The use of force is one of the commission's projects, and we continue to talk about use of force. And what is that? Mitigated use of force? I want to know what mitigated use of force is. I know Ezell Ford didn't get the benefit of mitigated use of force. He got the full Monty on use of force, which means he was shot to death and killed. And when we're talking about use of force, we have to examine the mental stability of the person using use of force, not just the people who they encounter, but what is the officer's mental stability? Is he or she mentally sane, or are they mentally insane? And we're never going to know that through the boards coming up with use of force projects and things like that. You're not going to talk about your officers being mentally ill. The reality is that if you don't do something about the mental illness in the police department, you can't do anything about the mental illness on Skid Row. You can't do anything about the mental illness that happens when police officers come up and encounter a mentally ill person. I'll show you a video after this about one of your mentally ill cops.
Melina Abdullah, and we did have one more card. We have Mr. Hayes.
So good morning. I'm here because I'm tired And I'm wondering why you all aren't responding in the ways that you should respond. Matt Johnson, you were on KCET and you talked about us disrupting positive conversation. The conversation that you seem to have that's you call productive is conversation among yourself. But I'm looking at this police leaders unveil principles intended to shift policing practices nationwide. And I think that you all should read that. We are not here to disrupt productive conversation. We are here to have productive conversation. The problem is you refuse to engage us. There are 34 police inside the building that I counted, and it seems like some more came in order to police 5 or 6 community members. First of all, we don't need to be policed. We're here to make public comment because this is our space. This is supposed to be the space that we engage you in. And there's a fundamental problem in having these meetings in police headquarters in the first place. We shouldn't be intimidated. We shouldn't be told that we're disrupting productive conversation, because your conversation is supposed to happen with us, not upon us. So I'm going to forward this article to you. These are from police who are saying this is the way you should be engaging community. Instead of treating us as if we are invading your space, you should really listen to what it is we have to say. Your officers outside are playing games. They hold us outside. They enact new practices every single week. They search us. They do things in order to make our lives difficult, as if we're doing something wrong by engaging in our civic duty. So as commissioners, we are asking you to be our voice. And I get tired of saying this, but you're supposed to be our voice. You're not supposed to be echoing the police. You're not supposed to be hobnobbing with the police and saying that you're on their side. You're supposed to be our voice. And so I'm asking you again and hoping you hear me this time.
Thank you for your
Mr.
comments.
President, I realize I do have a comment. If I might be able to make a comment at this point. Ms. Abdullah's comments remind me that I wanted to make a comment that we had a significant hearing last week reviewing the department's own report about use of force, which you just referred to this morning, and that will be coming back to us in April. The report is available to the public to look at, and you can all come back and speak to us about it in April. It's over 300 pages, and it gives you great detail about the use of force issues within the police department. It's in fact quite responsive to many of the complaints that have come to us, which we have shared. In addition, if you've been listening, next week, a week from today, the Inspector General will present to us his report on 10 years of use of force by the police department. We haven't seen it yet, but it will be available next week, and then we will have a discussion about that, and we will listen to your comments on that and take them to heart. Those two reports together represent more information about a major city police department's use of force than that exists from any other major city police department in the United States. We aren't doing everything right, but we are looking at it, and we are taking it seriously, and the department is responding. And when you stand up here and tell us that we're not even listening to you, I suggest you actually listen to us periodically. We've now given out reports which provide you with a tremendous amount of information. You can make fun of me all you want. But I'm serious about this. I'm serious about use of force. I'm serious about reforming the police department. And I think I'm doing a good job about it, as good as I can. And I welcome your help, and I welcome your support. And I urge you to take a look seriously at the documents we made available and we'll make available next week. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do we have any other comments?
The next comment card is for Mr. Ted Hayes. Mr. Hayes?
Professor Abdullah, you had your 2 minutes. You can submit another card on any other item, including public comment. Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
Last week, you told me I couldn't criticize this document. Mr. Abdullah, I'll share this with you.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
On the front, there's this rail line. Probably public transit. They transport 1 million people a day in L.A. Rail, bus. LAPD has nothing to do with rail or buses. It's sheriff. Why show a prominent rail line on the cover when we have nothing to do with transportation? That's why, Mr. Abdullah, you'll find that they did the graphs, the circle graphs, the bar graphs, all in gray and blue. So you can't distinguish it. You know, you could do that if you made it a dotted line or a hash line or a striped line. They could all be black and white. But you can't distinguish one color from another on these graphs. And you let them get away with that. You let them hand you a document. When we saw the PowerPoint up on the screen, you couldn't see a damn thing, okay? And you let them get away. Don't you understand? This is confusion. This is distraction. This is not a genuine report. If you did something like this in a sociology class or a statistics class, you get an F. Because the instructor tells you how to do graphs, and they don't say put it in comparable colors. No, contrasting colors. So when you look at this, Ms. Abdullah, you'll find out that this doesn't really satisfy the public's ability to interpret what's going on readily. Yeah, you can struggle through it, but we'd like to look at it at a glance and know what you're talking about, and this does not do that. More importantly, what's with the rail line? Make someone tell you why they put railroad tracks on the front of this report.
Any additional comments?
There are no other comment cards on this item?
Well, just that the full 300-page report has more detailed information and also the narrative regarding the data that was collected and reviewed by the department. And not just so I would urge individual folks to look at not just the executive summary, but also the full detailed report.
Okay, we're now on item number 3, report of the Chief of Police, Chief Paysinger.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the Commission. I'll very briefly go through this week's crime report. Part 1 crime year-to-date this year compared to last is as follows. Homicides are up 27.5%. Sexual assaults are down 18%. Robbery shows an increase of 11.3%. And aggravated assaults show an increase of nearly 18% at 17.9%, for a total violent crime increase year-to-date of 12.7%. Property crime in the burglary category, we see a remarkable reduction at 16.2%. Motor vehicle thefts are down nearly 15% at 14.8%. Burglary and theft from vehicles have seen an uptick at plus 5%, and personal thefts show a decrease of nearly 9% at 8.9%, for a total property crime reduction year-to-date of 2%, which brings the total Part 1 crime increase year-to-date this year compared to last at 0.8%. By bureau, Central Bureau shows a Part 1 crime increase of 4.5%. South Bureau behind them at 3.0% increase. Valley Bureau still shows the negative at 0.7%. And West Bureau shows a Part 1 crime reduction of 2.5%. In terms of staffing, Mr. President, members of the Commission, sworn personnel on payroll, which includes recruits in the Academy, we currently stand at 9,894. Civilian personnel, the tally is 2,692, with approximately 585 civilian vacancies left unfilled.
How many vacancies was that again?
585.
And about 106 sworn vacancies.
That's accurate, yes, sir. Level 1 reserve officers, the tally is 252. Level 2 reserves, there are currently 32. Level 3 reserves are 111. And specialist volunteers are 372, with a chaplain corps coming in at 58. Pleased also to say that the cadet numbers for the week ending of March 5th, we tallied just over 7,000 Los Angeles police cadets. And that concludes the report of the Chief of Police.
Thank you. The increase in homicides and violent crime, how much of that would you attribute to gang violence?
Typically, that number hovers right around 40%, between 40 and 45%. I don't know if you may have seen the report in the newspaper a couple of days ago. There was a multi-11 shooting just south of Southeast, and just around the area of Compton. What I was very pleased to see, just in terms of the operational response, is that a number of calls were made to intervention workers in both that area and also the companion area in the city of Los Angeles. I would like to think, although I don't have any specific evidence, I would like to think that it had some effect on calming that behavior, because several of the gangs that were involved in that Compton incident were actually from the city of Los Angeles. So it could have been that we averted something that that had bad written all over it. I was very, very pleased to see the immediacy and the promptness with which our people reached out to the intervention folks in that region and enlisted their aid to help us identify and calm some of the attitudes that were going on at that time, which may have averted something terrible.
Thank you. Any other commissioner questions?
Question, Chief. One of the things I'm going to bring up on the 12th of April, with all of the statistics and the great information in the report, is there are a couple other areas that I think would be interesting, and one you may be able to deal with now. How many gang members are there in Los Angeles?
Mr. Commissioner, that number varies. Somewhere between 25 and 30,000.
Okay, so let's call it a minimum of 25,000. How many police officers do we have?
Currently just under 10, 9,800.
So you got 2.5 gang members for every LAPD officer in the city of Los Angeles.
Roughly.
In New York, there are 40,000 police officers?
36 and change, if my memory serves.
36,000. Do you know how many gang members?
I do not.
Okay. It'd be interesting to see. What's your knee-jerk as far as the ratio of gang members to police officers in major cities where we are?
I would just hazard a guess. The reality is that many years ago, Los Angeles essentially birthed the gang presence in this city as we know it now. Many of the most desperate gangs, some of the most violent gangs that we've seen emerge in the United States, street gangs, actually had their genesis here in the Los Angeles area. I don't think that some of the gangs are as pronounced. Their behaviors are as caustic in some areas of the city. But I would also caution this. There was a time many years ago when I was a young lieutenant at 77th and the chief of police was a young lieutenant at Southeast. Gang crime and violent crime was on an incredible spike. Yeah. You recall that at that time we were cataloging somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000 murders, 7,000 people shot. Although last year we came in with about 300 or so murders, the reality is, in comparison, that period to this period, there has been a remarkable decrease that has to do with, in my judgment, an increased recognition of outreach to the community, working with the community, providing options, resources, and opportunities for people in the community that prior to that, in the late 80s and early 90s, didn't have those opportunities. I mentioned previously that outreach with the gang intervention segment of the community. There are many cities, not only do they not have that presence, some of them don't believe in that presence. And we believe here in Los Angeles that that's had an amazing effect on our ability to control gang violence in this city.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have 5 comment cards. We have Prentice Jenkins, Melina Abdullah, Ted Hayes, Akili, and Hamid Khan.
Prentice Jenkins, City Life newsletter, publisher, activist since 1991. Let's go down.
They say had violated their parole. That pursuit went all the way through El Cerrito, San Marino, and other places. One of the 2 suspects, the passenger, was taken into custody finally in San Marino after jumping out of the car. But the driver continued to block her too. Then he did the same, stopping the car outside a home. He was tackled and handcuffed a couple of blocks later after being taken down and out of the
He wasn't tackled and handcuffed. He was handcuffed and then tackled.
including Daniel Zayas, who spoke to the suspect running
Let's
from the
look at that
house.
again. This man is clearly handcuffed.
Walking him out,
slammed
he
him on
was
the ground.
tackled and handcuffed a couple
That
of
is a
blocks
crazy
later
cop.
after being taken
Now,
down
don't get me
and
wrong.
out of
That
the
is a
Hampstead
scumbag gang member. And he was just a cop when he arrested him. But he became a scumbag cop when he slammed him to the ground, handcuffed. Watch this.
Suspected gang members who they say had violated their parole, and that pursuit went all the way through El Sereno, San Marino, and other places. One of the two suspects, the passenger, was taken into custody finally in San Marino after jumping out of the car, but the driver continued a block or two. Then he did the same, stopping the car outside a home. He was tackled and handcuffed a couple of blocks later after being taken down and out of the Honey Baked Ham store in nearby Pasadena. Two employees were inside, including Daniel Zayas.
Do you believe this is, Mr. Basinger, do you believe that's police brutality? One of your cops grabs a suspect. Don't get me wrong, he's a scumbag gang member. But that cop is a scumbag too. Because all he had to do was take that man over to the car. But what he did was he decided to mete out a little street justice. It's probably how they did Ezell Ford. They meet their own street justice out. Slammed him to the ground, stuck his knee on him, and started telling him, "You running from us again, I'll kill you next time."
Melina Abdullah.
So I just want to pick up on where I left off and lift up that today is International Women's Day. And if no other day of the year, I would expect you all to check your patriarchy. So the way that you addressed me was extremely condescending and patriarchal, Professor Saltzman. Your job, all of your jobs, is to represent the community. Your job is to listen to us. We read your reports. We commit our time to coming here. And my point in lifting up what's happening and the way that you're engaging or not engaging was to say that you have an opportunity to do something different. You have an opportunity to see us as civically engaged residents and citizens, rather than people who disrupt your life, who are a thorn in your side. You have an opportunity to say, we don't need to be surrounded with police who constantly intimidate us, but listen to what we have to say. We're not here because we don't have anything better to do. None of us are paid to be here. None of us receive recognition for being here. We're here because we want to live in a city that's actually safer. Now, we might be on different sides. We might be at different points, right? I don't believe in this policing system. And the more I come here, the more I believe that policing as we know it has got to go. I believe that policing is fundamentally patriarchal and oppressive, the way that it's meted out right here. But it's your job to listen to me, even if you're not there. It's your job to listen to me as someone who you're supposed to represent, and then say, well, how do we engage? How do we listen to each other? We read all your reports, and we're told to sit down and be quiet and laughed at and tootled. We shouldn't be treated that way. You need to shift your way of thinking. And that's why I'm asking you to read the report that was put out nationally that says, how are you supposed to effectively engage community? And that's what you should all be committed to doing.
Ted Hayes. Ted Hayes, followed by Akili and Hamid Khan.
Several times I've mentioned that the administrative wing of the police department should chastise the presentations made here. One on the basis of this report that I mentioned previously, but also I believe it was Commissioner Saltzman who mentioned that some statistical figure given to them was implausible. So implausible in my mind it rose to being a damn lie. But nevertheless, it was presented, and I indicated that was the kind of contempt not only do they show you, but they also show the general public. And I think that's plausible, that when these people who have stars and stripes and bars and things come before you and make these reports, they should be held accountable to the content and the nature of the report they provide. I still believe that. I still believe that if you put the use of force report in the hands of professors in a school, they'll point out this is shabby work, very shabby work. The design, the structure, the formation of it is not really professional. Hire an agency to do these things when you compile it and publish it. Hire someone outside the police department. I can tell you it's notifiably, obviously, police work, not professional drafting and compiling of a report. I know high school kids who could do better, and I know adults on this department should be able to do better. If not, they should be chastised, punished, and reprimanded for turning out such garbage.
Akili?
Members of the committee, a couple of weeks ago I came here to testify, and I didn't get a chance to because I was arrested, because I spoke up. I have testified in front of bodies before across this country and never been treated like this. I've never testified at the county with this many police inside and out. I've never testified at the city and been treated this way. And I've never been lectured to by a man who clearly has no sense of what's going on. We don't come here to be lectured to. We come here to share what we think and feel. We don't come here to be pointed at and arrested for sharing our vision and understanding. So maybe what you may want to do from time to time, and I think that this report that just came out may be the best time for you to hold the community meeting that we have been asking for, so that you get a chance to really feel and understand what people in the community see and understand and feel about you, so that they can be lectured to, or rather you can be lectured to by them. You are supposedly, as Sister Melina talked about, our voice. You're not. You're a rubber stamp, and you know it. You're unaccountable, and you don't speak for, and you don't certainly speak with us. So I would ask you, we've asked you before, we sent you a letter, we've done everything properly done to come out and host the meeting, particularly as you talk about this report, this 300-page report that you have. Come out and share it with us. Come out and be with us. And leave half of these people here. Thank you.
Hamid Khan?
I think one of the reasons that we keep on saying you're a rubber stamp body is, and it's almost amusing to a point given the amount of education that sits on these chairs, that how you have completely failed to even look at it critically, what we've been saying and what we've been presenting to you. We brought you report after report of how flawed the policing is. Messenger was talking about gangs. Does any one of you know about gang injunctions and gang databases? Does any one of you know that how young as 10 years old, kids are going into gang databases because they fit the profile of three things? Maybe they're wearing shorts a different way, maybe they're walking a different way, maybe they're listening to music a different way. So when you speak about gang members, Soboroff, and you start doing this cost-benefit analysis, think of the lives that are being put in these gang databases. That's an F for doing your homework. So that's what it is, flawed by design, that you don't understand, you don't recognize, and that's why you become a rubber stamp body. We talked to you about this whole thing. LA Times about a month ago did this report that since 2004 they took a report. They took a tally of 6 counties since 2004, including Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Bernardino. 2,000 cases of police shooting. 1 prosecuted, that was acquitted as well. Something is flawed by design. Why is it going on like that? Your own report comes out like, just overwhelmingly black and mentally ill people that are being impacted. But yet again, flawed by design. We bring you a report about the body cameras. We bring you a report about the drones. You completely fail to look at it. And now the city council is stuck because they are stuck with a sticker shock. People are speaking how flawed the body cameras are turning out to be. Flawed by design. We bring you reports of suspicious activity. Flawed by design. You don't look at the impact. You keep on telling us that your intent is honest, but the impact is dishonest.
Thank you for your
That's
comments.
what's hurting us out there.
Do we have any additional comments?
We have no additional comments on this item. We're now on item number 4, regular agenda items. We have comment cards on 4A and 4B.
Move approval of item 4C.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? You said we had comment cards on which item?
4A and 4B. Would you like to hear?
Okay.
And for 4A, I would appreciate hearing from the department.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, 4A, Department's
Morning.
report dated March 3rd, 2016, relative to the 2015 Bias Policing and Mediation Annual Report to the Board of Police Commissioners.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Commander
morning.
Stuart Maislin, Commanding Officer of Internal Affairs Group, and with me is Dr. Luann Pinnell, the Director of Police Training and Education, as she can answer your questions and more articulately and competently explain our training efforts on fair and impartial policing.
We have quiet, please, in the audience while we hear this report. If you have a question or comment related to the report, you're welcome to submit a card, and you will have your time. Thank you.
As a brief summary, if you'd like me to just summarize some of the data, I will. This is a year-end report, so this is for all of 2015. And when you look at the total number of complaints initiated for 2014 and 2015, you see a pretty large decline. I would caution you to not give great credit to those numbers at this point. We present this data based upon complaints at intake. So it's based upon the information we have when the supervisor out in the field interviews the complainant and gets their basic story. What we've learned over the years is that as we investigate these complaints, sometimes a complaint that did not appear to have a bias policing allegation, a bias policing allegation will surface. So these numbers of 191 complaints in 2015 and even the 217 in 2014, because there are still many 2014 complaints still open, we think those numbers will go up somewhat. And we will adjust those as we provide future reports. As far as the bias policing data, it really has remained consistent, at least the complaint data over the last 3 years. As far as the numbers of accused employees, females continue to be underrepresented based upon their population on the department, as are African Americans, and Hispanic officers are slightly overrepresented.
But they're less likely, even taking into consideration the numbers in the department, they're less likely to have complaints against them. Is that
Females
correct?
and African Americans, yes. As far as the types of contact that results in bias policing complaints, traffic stops, pedestrian stops, and radio calls continue to be the top 3. The discriminatory conduct that's reported, detentions, arrests, and discourtesy are the top 3 in discriminatory conduct. And type of bias alleged is the most frequent, overwhelming is ethnicity. And that's 90.6% this past year, and that's very consistent over the years as well. Regarding the ethnic representation of complainants, African American males represent 47% this year, and as far as the types of bias, or the activities that led to it, traffic and pedestrian stops, and that the stop and the arrest is based upon ethnic bias. And by far, black or African American complainants accuse Hispanic and white employees of engaging in bias policing. As far as the adjudication data, that's different. That's based upon closed complaint data. And that shows that unfounded complaints are still the most frequent disposition, but it has been decreasing. Insufficient evidence to adjudicate has increased slightly, and not resolve has decreased. But, of course, This is balanced by the number of mediated complaints. And this last year, that was 11.8%. And as far as complaints where, when we review them at Internal Affairs, we disagree with the chain of command regarding the adjudication, we've sent six of them this year to the Office of Operations. One was not reviewed prior to the one-year statute, but of the remaining five, three of them, the Office of Operations agreed with Internal Affairs Group, and two of them, the Office of Operations agreed with the chain of command. So it's pretty much a wash.
Could I just ask a
Yes.
question about that? So there's a parallel, there are two adjudications that occur, both in Internal Affairs and then parallel chain of command. Or
No, when complaints are investigated, the completed investigation is sent to the chain of command, to the employee's commanding officer to adjudicate. They recommend an adjudication. It then goes through the next level of review, which is normally the Geographic Bureau, and either the deputy chief or the commander in the Geographic Bureau will either sign off on the recommendations of the commanding officer, or they can military endorse it, which means recommend their own adjudication. Then it comes to Internal Affairs for review.
All of them come in.
All of them do. And they go through my review and evaluation, which is our quality control unit. And once they go through review and evaluation, every single bias policing complaint comes into my office, and I review them personally. So if I disagree with the adjudication by the chain of command, those are the ones that we send to the Office of Operations to basically break the tie.
And so there were 6 instances of that out of how many in 2015?
Well, just 6 where we disagreed.
Right.
As far as the number of allegations, excuse me a second.
264.
Is it
That would be
264?
434 allegations that were, of course, not the total number of complaints. The total number of complaints would be probably about half that were closed during the year.
Okay.
I know we have a limited number of on-body cameras in the field right now, but I'm really interested in the future as these reports come on, the impact of the cameras in relation to the bias policy complaints. When different stations have cameras, is that impacting the actions of the officer? Is it impacting the complaints against the officer? And I think that as we move on with this, I don't know if we have enough statistical information based on the numbers that we have out in the field now.
Yeah.
But these are things that I think
Seems to be we should start getting that information because we have the cameras in a number of divisions.
Right, and we don't yet. I mean, what's going to be difficult is, it's one thing once the complaint is made, and we are going to be tracking the data as far as how the body-worn video cameras and the digital in-car video, how both of them assist in adjudication of complaints. And we're going to provide that in 2 different ways, whether or not it's sufficient information to adjudicate the complaint upon intake without having to conduct any further investigation, or if it assists the adjudication of the allegations once the investigation has been done. What it's not going to really help us with is to answer the question of how many complaints perhaps did it prevent.
I don't know.
And
Why do you say that?
I mean, well,
I mean, if the numbers are going to go down by 40,
Right. I mean, I think you can infer.
You can. That's right. I mean, we're the same way we can't tell you how many murders we prevented by our presence. I mean, we can't tell you what hasn't happened. But yes, we can look at the data, and we'll be able to report the data, and to see, what happens to the numbers. And then yes, you can infer, what the causes of
there'll be a number of
decreases might be.
variables, but this
Yes.
variable in other places has had a huge impact.
Yes. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah.
But I mean, as far as how it relates specifically to bias policing, that may be difficult. We'll provide that data as best we can as it relates to bias policing, and certainly in our quarterly discipline reports, we'll be providing much more of that information as to how it impacts the number, the volume of complaints we actually
What I
take.
think one of the things we'd like to see is in divisions that have the body cameras to do a comparison to the historical information of that division before and after having the body cameras.
And we will
that
be
should
able
be that should be a good indication of whether body cameras are having an impact on the number of these complaints.
I agree, and we'll be able to
and
do
the
that.
disposition of these complaints.
We will be able to do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So going on, we get to bias policing mediation. And as you know,
Before we talk about mediation, is there so first of all, I noticed that between the 4 bureaus, it's relatively consistent in terms of the number of complaints.
yes.
But are the populations of the 4 bureaus relatively equal?
No, they're not.
So what's the...
If you look at, and I just happen to have the 2010 census data that breaks down population by bureau. So in the valley, there are 1.5 million, almost 1.5 million residents, or 37% of the city's population. And the Central Bureau is 20% of the city's population. West Bureau about 24%, and in South Bureau 18%, with only approximately 690,000 residents.
The Valley throws a way off.
So the Valley does throw it off, and as you know, we have.
So when you look at it that way, the Valley has significantly less bias policing complaints. And I guess Central probably has, Central and South are over-index.
Central and West are pretty much in proportion to their population data based on the 2010 census. And yes, South is certainly higher, and Valley is lower.
Right. And do you break these complaints? Do you analyze the complaints, patrol versus the specialized units like Metro and gangs and narcotics, to see if there are areas that are more problematic or generate more complaints than you would expect given the number of officers in those units?
We have not, but I think I can tell you just from looking at them, like I have over the past 3 years now, the vast majority are patrol. But we can certainly break it down and provide that data in the next report and start to provide data that reflects patrol operations, traffic, and more of the specialized divisions like Metro. Although I don't know that we'll be able to break down, when we look at patrol, we may not be able to break out gang details or narcotics enforcement details. We'll do it
Let's
best
see if we can do
see
that.
if we can.
I would expect most of them to be out of patrol just because that's where most of the officers are. So I'm less concerned about the raw numbers than the percentages.
Okay.
I'm fine to move on to mediation unless anybody has any other questions on this.
So mediation, we've been doing mediation for 2 years, and I do have some updated data I decided to bring with me to show, to basically report on 2 years and 3 months worth of the program. I have data that goes through March 3rd of this year. So for the duration of the program, we've had 478 total complaints that have been referred, bias policing complaints, to my bias policing coordinator. And of those 478 complaints, 257 were not eligible, and that's about almost 54%, and 221, or 46%, were eligible complaints. So now, of the 221 that were eligible for bias policing mediation, 140 of them were reassigned to be investigated. Of the number that were reassigned, 36 of the 140, or almost 26% of the cases, officers declined to participate.
Thanks. Sorry, Commander Mason, I just had a question, and I think I must have missed this, but maybe you had explained it to me at a previous agenda item dealing with the mediation program, but what makes a complaint ineligible for mediation? Or what makes a complaint eligible for mediation? Is it simply the participation of both the complainant and the accused employee.
But there are some circumstances, like it can involve a use of force.
Okay.
There are some requirements as far as numbers of bias policing complaints that either the complainant made or that the officer has received over a certain time period. So, if there are aggravated circumstances involving the complaint, it would not be eligible. This is for basically complaints where the complainant is complaining about the stop, the detention, perhaps there was a search, and perhaps there was a traffic ticket, or minor discourtesy, but not more aggravated complaints involving force, arrest, and those kinds of things.
Got it.
Okay. So getting back to the 140 complaints that were reassigned, 53 complaints the complainant declined. And then there were 43 of the 140 where we couldn't locate the complainant, we couldn't get a hold of them. And my bias policing coordinator, by the way, she not only makes phone calls to the complainants, but she goes out to the address that we have on file. She attempts to track down if the complainant moved, where did they move to. I mean, we really make extraordinary efforts to try and get in touch with people to offer them this program. But of the 53 where complainants declined, I asked the question, I say, why are people saying no? Because, if we're going to try and get past that, you kind of have to know. So the reason they're saying no is, there are some because people make their complaint and they just want to be done with it and they don't have the time and they can't invest the time to do it. That's one main reason, although I will say we are... Matter of fact, I just went to an event with the city attorney's office. It was an all-day kind of a seminar. I think they called it a colloquium event, which I wasn't sure what a colloquium was, so I had to go to find that out. But it was really all about the bias policing mediation program, their dispute resolution program. And it gave me an opportunity to talk to my counterparts over there, and one of the things that we talked about was, well, if people can't take off work to go, why don't we make it more convenient for them and start scheduling mediations for the evening and the weekends? And, of course, part of the problem there is that the mediators are all volunteers that have lives as well. But since that conversation took place 2 weeks ago, we now have 2 mediations scheduled on Saturdays that are coming up. So we'll start with Saturdays, and then boom, then we're going to try and do weekends. And they're Saturdays that are going to take place at public libraries, so they're good neutral grounds, and we're not inconveniencing complainants to have them come downtown. It's going to be in their community. So I'm really optimistic that is going to assist us as we move forward. But some of the other reasons, we're involved in this national discussion on policing, and what we hear from some folks is that they want the officers punished, and that's all they care about. And then what we hear from others is that they watch TV, they listen to the news, they watch all kinds of TV programs, and they're afraid of the Los Angeles Police Department, they're afraid of police officers, and they're not willing to sit down in a room with a Los Angeles police officer. So as we continue on with our relationship building and our efforts to build closer ties with the community, it's going to be a longer-term effort department-wide to have some impact on those folks. But we're very optimistic that we're going to be able to improve in that area.
When you look at the percentages of people that were satisfied, that thought the process was fair, that had an increased understanding of the other side, both on the complainant side and the officer side, obviously this is a program that we need to encourage and find ways to get more complainants and officers engaged in the process.
And we are committed to that, and the comments of the city attorney 2 Fridays ago, he's committed to it. So while this is the 3rd year of the pilot program, I feel very comfortable in saying that we're going to come to you at the end of the year recommending that this continues, because it's the best hope for the future. And
thank you.
So Dr. Pinnell is here.
Yes.
And she can explain a little more about our training efforts.
Good morning.
Good morning. I want to explain a couple things about training. And one is that the training that we're doing is not, bias policing is one, this report is one of many factors that we're trying to incorporate. And I think as I've presented at other times, we're trying to integrate several things into many of the trainings that we have. So when we look at the efforts for 2016, one of the big efforts that we're doing right now is looking at the first 5 years for our officers. I do hear that our patrol is one of the more significant areas where we're having bias policing complaints. So we want to put more front-end effort on our younger officers who are coming through and developing. So we look at every area where we touch officers as they come through their career. So certainly the academy is one place, but for this topic in particular, we want to also look, we're putting a focused effort on our FTOs, our field training officers, because they have a particular role in that they're going to help probationers learn policing, but they have a particular challenge. They need to be able to understand their own biases. They need to understand the biases that they may be seeing in somebody else. And then they have to have another skill, which is how to correct that and improve on performance. And so we're putting a more concerted effort on our field training officers at the same time as we look at giving the field training officers more on our transgender community and also on mental illness. So there's many areas where bias can come in. So you're going to hear us talking a lot about fair and impartial policing because that's what we want to promote. We want to teach that our officers in every situation, to the best of their ability, are looking at fair and impartial policing. Not just about these complaints, but about homeless and mentally ill, and there's multiple areas where we have economic advantage or disadvantage. We have to look at what biases that we might have when we are doing the positions and jobs that we have. So Police Sciences and Leadership 1, as you know, we're bringing back classes of, after the academy, they come back at 11 months. And so fair and impartial policing is a topic that is discussed and explored there. And then also we are having a piece on emotional intelligence and having them look at their own awareness and improving upon that. It's one thing to talk about it in the academy when you don't have experience in the field, but what we're wanting them to do is bring back the experience that they have in the field and explain and work on the struggles that really happen when you try to apply what you've learned in the academy. It's not a sterile environment anymore.
So what's the structure of those conversations? Is it like a roundtable discussion? Is it scenario-based training? Is it lecture?
All of that. So what we try to do is, again, when you're working with adult learning, you want to make sure that we continually challenge and don't become too predictable. So yes, there's a portion where you have to give information. That might be a little bit more lecture, but then we quickly move it to facilitation and trying to pull from their experiences and looking at where we have the gaps. And so we're hearing kind of, again, what the gap has been between the academy and that point. Now that we have had a few of those sessions going, we are working on the creation and design of Police Sciences and Leadership 2. Well, we will bring that same cohort back as a class. Now, they'll have other training throughout the department, but when they come back 2 years later, we will ensure that they get their perishable skills training from post that they're required to do, but at the same time, we're integrating these topics. What we want to see is that it's not just a standalone, that it's not just a checkbox, that as they go through, there's not a department course that they wouldn't go through where these topics aren't coming up again and again and again, because we don't want it to be something that we visit. We want it to become incorporated in how we do all that we do. So we have the field training officers is an area of focus right now, but we're also looking at the existing courses that we have, our supervisor course, our command development course, and the other area that I'm excited to look at a little more, we have sometimes not given as much we haven't given as much training to our civilians. But often our civilians can be our first line of contact with the community, and how they interpret a phone call, how they interpret a request for help can go a long way, and how that gets interpreted to an officer. So we want to make sure that they are also incorporated and not left behind on this. So we have a training that we're working on for 2016 for all civilians to go through that will incorporate fair and impartial policing and their role as it relates to ensuring that the community is served from a civilian perspective.
No, I just wanted to make a comment that these issues related to implicit bias are, so critical and but also really challenging. Clearly, almost insurmountable because of implicit bias is so pervasive just among all of us. And in my professional life, we run a live client immigrant justice clinic, and what you're describing, the sort of continuous reinforcement of sorts of values and sort of efforts to diminish implicit bias. I think that's really the only way, and so I appreciate what it sounds like the department is doing, because related to these kinds of bias issues are the other areas that we're concerned about, because if something escalates to use of force, it might have began from some kind of negative stereotype reinforcement that might have been incurring between an individual officer and also the community member that they're engaged with. I'm only making these comments to empathize with that struggle, and then
it is not an easy solution. It's going to have to be a continued effort. I do want to make a point of saying that we are also reaching out to partners. So one of the things that I'm encouraged about, I think last year we had 25 courses offered to us from the Museum of Tolerance on Beyond Diversity, Integrity as a Tool for Building Community Trust, which has racial profiling and Beyond Diversity mixed in that 10-hour course. So we want to not just have a one-stop thing, but that we also incorporate outside people and input. So the fair and impartial policing curriculum also comes from an outside person who came here to do a train the trainer. It was actually very exciting because we had 90 people put in requests to be on that training cadre. So I'm hearing from people in our department who are saying, I want to be a part of making sure that this gets communicated throughout our department. So we were able to get a really great quality and diverse group of people, sworn and civilian, to be on that training cadre. So we're looking kind of going through every area and trying to look at, are we making sure that we touch every area, from dispatchers and detention officers and patrol, that we aren't just looking at one area.
And there is a lot of research that supports the idea that consistent and effective training can really have a major impact on implicit bias, isn't there?
Absolutely. It has to be a department commitment, and that's why you kind of need to make sure that you're seeing it throughout. If it just happened once in 2014, right, you're not going to see that replicated in other places. So we want to make sure that it becomes a much more frequent conversation.
Thank you. Fred, I want to start by expressing my appreciation for the quality of the report. These reports are significantly better than they used to be, and I appreciate how much work goes into them, this annual report on top of the quarterly reports. Thank you for that. Also appreciate more broadly the positive developments that are reported in the report, in particular regarding mediation. And one of the points you made, Dr. Pinnell, about making sure that at the very front line, citizens who are volunteering with the department on intake are also being trained in this to help solve the problem. And so I'm appreciative of that and feel very good about that. I do continue to be very troubled by the data for adjudications. I call your attention to the last page of the report, Table 6, which, if I'm reading it correctly, says that for 2015, on 434 occasions, someone took the time, made the effort to file a complaint of bias policing, and in 0 of those cases, the department concluded that the complaint could be sustained, and that over the 3-year period reported here, the 4-year reported here, there were 1,794 occasions when someone took the time and effort to make a bias policing complaint, and over those 4 years, the department concluded that in 0 instances was the complaint sustained. That's just not credible, and particularly given we've just been talking about the implicit bias problem, those numbers just are not credible. And so given that disconnection, my question is the department doing anything to look into the adjudication process to see how we can make that connection, to figure out that what is actually going on there?
We continue to adjudicate complaints based upon the preponderance of the evidence standard, and there has to be evidence in order to sustain a complaint. There has to be significant evidence to sustain it. There was one complaint in 2013 where 2 allegations of bias policing were sustained against an officer. That's recorded on this chart as not guilty, not as sustained, because the chief of police directed that officer to a Board of Rights, and I think I've explained in the past, the Board of Rights hearing heard 3 charges against the officer. 2 were bias policing allegations that the chief believed were sustained, and 1 was for recording false information on a notice to appear, which are traffic citations, and it wasn't 1, it was a whole series of them, probably over 100. So there was data to back up, to support the bias policing allegations. Now, what that Board of Rights did in examining the evidence, the board found the officer not guilty of the 2 counts of bias policing, so it'll always be recorded as not guilty. They found him guilty of the other charge and ultimately recommended that the chief of police fire that officer, which is what the chief of police did. It just wasn't on the bias policing charges.
Commander, can you talk a little bit about the challenge in hitting that legal standard, if you have, like, what kind of evidence you would need if you're in a situation where you do not have body camera or in-car video footage and you just have an interaction between an officer and a civilian? How would a complaint in that situation be sustained?
Well, let me explain what happened in the 2013 case. That's probably the best example, is a real-life example. And that was a complaint that was initiated by a shop owner in a small little shopping district. And what he saw was an officer, a motor officer, stopping people and impounding their trucks. And he believed that all the people that were being stopped by this officer were Hispanic. So that caught his eye, concerned him. He called and made a complaint. Now, during the investigation of that complaint, of course, we looked at all of the citations that this officer wrote. We also looked at his field data reports. Going back to the consent decree, officers have to complete field data reports on anybody they stop. And the directions on a field data report is for an officer to include the race of the person they stop. And it's based upon the officer's first impression of the race of the individual when they first see them. And then, of course, when it comes to writing citations, well, what's supposed to go on traffic citations are, because they're in lieu of an arrest, are accurate information. So what this officer was doing, as the investigation progressed and we looked at all of his citations, he was writing people with obvious Hispanic surnames, looked at their DMV photos. They were obviously Hispanic, followed up with many of them, and many of them didn't even speak English. But on his field data reports and on his citations, he was listing them as white. So what that gave us, we had physical evidence, we had real-life evidence to say, wait a minute, this is proof that this officer is doing something, is engaging in bias policing. Because it was all people of color.
Right.
He never made mistakes the other way. The mistakes were only in one direction. Mm-hmm. So we felt certain that we were able to substantiate bias policing by the officer. And those counts were sustained. The chief of police sustained them and directed that officer to a Board of Rights hearing. Now, Board of Rights hearing is a de novo hearing, and evidence is presented, and the board members decided.
Right. So, but that was in the one case where it went in that. Talk about the other literally thousands over the last several years. And just so we can understand, and for the members of the public to understand, why it is so difficult to sustain these complaints.
Well, so many of them are the beliefs. People have beliefs that they were stopped, and the only reason that they were stopped was because of their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, whatever their age, whatever it may be. And when you investigate them and you interview the complainants and they have their explanation of why they think they were stopped, we go through a bias policing protocol. We have set bias policing questions. We ask them for their definition of bias policing, why they believe the officer engaged in bias policing, and then we ask the officers during the investigation the same questions. But when you have only the accusation and the officer's denial, and you have no other information because, again, the complainant got a citation, and then we look at their citation data, and their citation data shows that they stop all races fairly equally as far as writing citations. We look at their arrest data, it's the same thing. We really have nothing to break the tie. And in many cases, we find, in a lot of cases, there are cases where civilian complainants will manufacture information where we can prove that there were issues with credibility, and that's why then a tie can be broken towards areas of credibility.
I hate to sound like a broken record, but I can't wait till every single stop there's a body camera. It just seems like a huge number of these, because you're going to have evidence on both sides of the camera. The other thing that I think is really interesting here is on both sides of the camera. I'm talking on page 8. The satisfaction with the process, the fairness with the process, the understanding of the other party, the recommendations are just wonderful. And the hope is that more and more of this mediation will go on, because it looks like every person is benefiting from this. And I'm really happy to hear how you basically recruit people and chase them down to come in and try this process.
Well, we are trying our best.
I just wanted to add, I guess, a couple of comments. I mean, the challenge with implicit bias, and maybe one of the reasons why there are complaints, but there's often insufficient evidence, is because implicit bias sometimes operates even unspokenly. So even if there is testimony on both sides, or if the complaint is based on individual experience, there might not even be anything verbalized, to substantiate it. And I've said this in previous meetings when this issue has been agendized, but I think it's the volume of complaints that we have to continue to pay attention to. And Commander Maislin agreed at the time, and that's why I think there is a lot of effort put into reducing bias, at the front end. The other problematic issue, and I think this has to do with the standard for making, at least in the legal context, proving race discrimination claims. I mean, just from my own experience, litigating such cases, it's even though it's just a preponderance standard, the legal system works against when we've filed claims like that, the legal system works against us because direct evidence is so necessary, even for preponderance. And direct evidence or witness, corroboration, all of that. It's really difficult to prove, and so once again, I think that emphasizes that. Continuing to pay attention to the number of complaints that are made, and looking at the sort of the root causes, and trying to address that, and trying to reduce bias at the front end.
If I just want a couple more comments. First, Commissioner Soboroff, I agree with you that the body cameras will help us move in the right direction, and I join you, as I know you have, in encouraging the City Council to move on funding the body cameras so that we can move forward, that the department is ready to implement that. We've approved it some time ago, and we're now just waiting, and I find that quite frustrating and I think contributing to the problem, and I think I would urge the members of City Council to move forward on that. Second, I appreciate once again you're describing the one case out of the 1,798 in which the conclusion was that the bias policing actually had happened. That's encouraging in the sense that at least in that case, which sounds overwhelming, the system was able to reach a conclusion that the bias policing had occurred. But even if we put one in each one of those boxes, 1 out of 1,798 to me is still not credible. And in the context of the national conversation that we're having, it seems to me like other things that we have pointed out where there's a lack of transparency. For example, in my view, not releasing videos. And I know this is not your department, but I just, as an example, to me, this adjudication problem, this disconnection between the result from the adjudication and what is credible also undermines the trust, the credibility of the department, and the trust the communities can have in the department. And to me, that's a very significant problem. I appreciate the work you're doing on it, but we have much more work to do. And I, Mr. President, as a result, I'm going to vote no on this item. I've been here 9 years. I've heard this report many times. It's an improved report, yet we still have the same outcome with respect to adjudications. And I just feel at this point I'm going to vote no on the report. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
We have 9 comment cards, sir.
Okay, we have a motion for...
We have 9 comment cards on this side. We'll begin with the first 4, Paula Minor, Red Chief Hunt, Ted Hayes, and Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Good morning. First, I have a positive comment. I think the officer sitting there made a statement about moving mediations to weekends, evenings, etc., that were more accessible to the community. I feel that's very positive, and I feel that's a recommendation the commission might also include in their thoughts about some of the things that we as members of the public are asking you to do. My second comment has to do with just the question about the report. The cover letter that the chief put on the report said that this was supposed to be a quarterly report, but the one we seem to have received is annual. And I just wondered if it, and this is something the commission might ask, is it the requirement to be quarterly, was that somehow ended because the original request was quarterly, and if it will be reinstated as a quarterly report?
To that?
We still provide a quarterly report. For the 4th quarter of the year, what we like to do is provide data for the entire year because it's more meaningful. So it's just a yearly report at the year end.
But still, the original request was for a quarterly report.
There are quarterly reports.
Yeah, to be presented to the commission quarterly. So the other thing I wanted to do is respond about this report and reports in general, make a formal request. I know it's not on this item, for us to be able to, myself, to receive a hard copy of the reports if I request them. I know you say look at them online. Sometimes it's difficult to study them online if you need to go back and forth. The other thing is I cannot print them out. I had to ask someone to print out this particular one. So I'm making a formal request to get a copy of the use of force report in hard copy and this report in hard copy.
Sure.
I look particularly because I'm interested in the training for the fair and impartial policing and for the racial profiling. Just quickly, I'm concerned about the training partner being the Museum of Tolerance, and maybe other partners should be considered since most racial profiling results in African American and Latino individuals being a part of it.
Okay. You can have my copy. It's printed already. Somebody will hand it to you. Yeah.
Red Chief?
699 days now by the city of Los Angeles. But I've got so many other things to talk about. If we don't cover them, you can see them on ladailyblog.com. We talk all about
the Red Chief Hunt Alpha Report. After being discriminated against, and a federal judge came back and said, you've been discriminated against 19 times and gave me 2 awards. I'm still today, I was arrested January 15th for wearing my scarf, which is totally legal, after the city paid me $215,000 for it. And I was discriminated. Now, when I was making my bias policing complaint about that. The lieutenant read me my Miranda rights, said I had the right to remain silent because I was filing a complaint. Wow. You could have seen that one on my face. I said, this is real live stuff that's real happening. Nobody's never called me. Then on November 10th, Matt called for a recess. I was arrested out there for being black in the hallway for trying to come to a public meeting. That was biased policing. I filed last 20 complaints. They called me for a complaint last year. A guy stopped me on Figueroa, and the guy pulled me over. He says, well, you look like a pimp. I said, well, what do a pimp look like? I said, that has to be biased policing. I says, this is what I don't get about Los Angeles Police Department. The training is not adequate. The sergeant who happened to know me came by and says, I know him from the Venice Beach. I says, yeah, well, you guys just said I was a pimp. I said, yeah, I pimped the city of Los Angeles, but I ain't out here on the hostro pimping. And that let me know that when you guys stop the prostitutes or whatever people for walking down the street, that something's not right. It's a lot of unfair policing. So when it comes to biased policing, call me. I'll give you the truth, because here's my theory, and I work with a licensed psychologist. If I were you, and the white folks don't look at it like that.
Tud Hayes.
The officer said that people are afraid to sit down in a room with police officers. How do you know that? Who told you that? Where are your stats on that information? That's bias right there. To believe that people don't do dispute resolution because they're afraid to come in and be in a room with an officer. If that's the state of affairs, which are people who come in and request dispute resolution, we're in very bad shape. It's not just Black Lives Matter, but the entire population is concerned about police and can't be in a room with them to try to talk it out. Can't we all get along? Anyway, I think contempt for the general public. You see, police, I do believe, and I do know they have a them and us mentality. And police feel picked on. They feel abused. They feel violated. For good reason. But anyway, I filed a complaint because I went to a minority, in fact, it was an immigrant community. And when you come in at the reception desk, right behind the officers, there's a big placard this big with letters that large, out of service. That's what they put on the cars when it's not an officer driving a car. They said that was not a complaint. There was no validity of any violation for saying out of service. They didn't say it was a joke, but that's biased policing. That's contempt for the public to put a sign like that over the desk, and everyone can see it and read it. You know what? Some of these immigrants believe that the police are really out of service from the country, from where they come from.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Yes, thank you for an opportunity to address this commission. My name is Yvonne Michelle Autry, former Board of Directors of LA CAN. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Saltzman, for that. Thousands of people cannot be bipolar, manic depressive, psychotic, paranoid, or delusional, or wrong in their assessment of biased policing, whether it is racist or whether it is sexist. I'd like to reference last week when I was not permitted, which is my constitutional right, to address my elected and appointed officials prior to my colleagues who had every right to lead a very legal and lawful civil disobedient action to celebrate or to draw, not to celebrate, to draw attention to an excessive use of force murder of course, our brother Africa. I was not allowed to enter by two of the police officers outside, and then 1 week before that, I was not allowed to speak when an officer, Vincencio, received my request to speak and then said that I couldn't speak, but then subsequently Tud Hayes submitted his card and he was allowed to speak when I was not. So I don't know if that was sexist, I don't know if you're just trying to shut me up, whatever the issue. Okay, that is biased, or again, it violates my constitutional right legally and lawfully to address my city-appointed and elected officials. So I want that on the record because earlier Sister Molina spoke about sexism. And right now, in an increasing conservative, racist environment, of course, which is exemplified in the murders of more black people, black men and women, and some Hispanic people, and what you call mentally ill, I guess, to justify those sacrificial lambs and the maintenance of the status quo. Again, Sister Molina did speak about some experiences of sexism, and we need to expose this so that we can move forward out of your fear of loss of power, because change is imminent. We will stand until our civil rights are continued to be respected. We need a community oversight committee of the community.
Thank you for your comments.
Okay, the next 5 speakers: Melina Abdullah, Hamid Khan, Riddell Jones, Tud Hayes, and Wayne Spindler. Hamid Khan.
Before you start my time, there's a question about this. Can I ask a question real quickly? The question is to you, Mr. Maisland, that in the mediation process, is it correct to understand that it's more like arbitration, that once that mediation is done, case is closed?
You can answer the question.
Yes.
So no action can be taken against the officer if other things emerge after that?
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay. So the point I'm trying to make that is that while a lot of horn is being tooted about the mediation process, that fundamentally is flawed to begin with. Because what we are looking at is this illusion of remedy, but it is something that is more or less, we all know what happens in private insurances, in healthcare, and other pieces of complaint as well, that it becomes an arbitration process, that we give up our right. So first of all, we are seeing that people are, by itself, sitting in an environment where there's a completely and unequal power dynamic, where you have somebody that you're complaining against. That person they have to deal with on the street as well. Once that mediation is done, case is closed.
Can they apply charges against the...
Could you stop my time, please?
Yeah, we'll stop your time. Okay, because you presented one side of it. My question is, on the other side, in a mediation, if something comes out where the citizen was doing something unlawful or et cetera, can you file on that?
We would not. It works both ways.
Yeah, that's my
if
point.
there was serious misconduct that came up that we were not previously aware of, that can be investigated.
On the officer.
But not the bias policing complaint or anything minor. And I think the same would be true for a civilian. If a civilian said something that admitted guilt in some kind of serious felonious activity, it very well could result in an investigation.
Okay, continue on.
So in essence, it's not just about zero sustained. It's even the path that we are taking towards resolution is flawed as well. So we see that how high these odds are stacked against the people. That repeatedly, first of all, the idea of bias policing, to call it is wrong. Let's call it racial profiling, because it's clearly indicated in your numbers that over 85% of these reports, over 90% are from people of color. There's about 11 white folks in there, right, which could be for anything sort of thing. So it's overwhelmingly racial profiling. Race is at the center of this thing. Increasingly, what you also see is black individuals, the highest percentage remain black. And then you create this illusion of resolution, which is flawed to begin with, because we're looking at arbitration. So no wonder, and the third point I want to raise it, because Salzman already spoke about zero sustained, is that the conditions of policing that are out there on the ground as well. Because in essence, as policing is changing through predictive policing, SAR, and other form of policing, you're creating condition that would lead to bias, that would lead to a completely, targeting of communities because they're engaging in completely innocent and non-criminal behavior. So it's not just about this report, because what this report shows is some very deeper issues that we need to be examining.
I think we all agree with that. And I think that's what... I think we... you raise a very good point with respect to the mediation process, that once you go through it, that is the end. But when you contrast that with the alternative, which is the reality is there have been 0 sustained complaints in 3 years. And the reason for that has a lot to do with the legal standard, which is very, very difficult to reach. And the legal standard, unfortunately, is not going to change. And I look at this as there are multiple ways we have to be attacking this. Number one is I look at the results of the level of satisfaction and the fairness with the process with community members. If you've filed a complaint and it's not sustained, you've not gone through this process, my guess is your level of satisfaction is probably a 0. So we have 70% that show of citizens that show that they were satisfied with the process, and 87% that feel like it was fair. That's far better than the alternative of a 0 sustained complaint. But I think this is one small part of it, and that's why what Dr. Pinnell was talking about has got to be the much bigger part of the solution. We have to be doing a better job of training our officers throughout their careers. This is not, as Dr. Pinnell articulated, this is not about in the academy you have a 2-hour lecture on not being not showing bias in policing. This is to be a sustained effort throughout officers' careers, and that's something we're looking very hard at. Our Inspector General is a part of his audits of the training. We're looking very hard at that to make sure that that is happening. Also, again, I agree with Commissioner Sobroff on this point. It is very important. One of the great added benefits of body cameras is that there is additional evidence in these complaints. And you're right. Someone from the audience made a point earlier that the camera's faced in one direction, but there's audio. You're hearing everything that is said by both parties. And that, while imperfect, is an additional piece of evidence that we do not have today. So it is no longer one person's word against another person's word. We're going to be able to hear what was said. We're going to be able to see at least something about what occurred during the entire process. So I think when you take all of these things in the aggregate, hopefully we are pushing forward and moving forward on these issues.
So you suggested 3 things, and I'll be done. You spoke about the satisfaction index, right? So you spoke about like over 70% people are satisfied. Of course, I mean, they at that point they can come up with that solution. I'm speaking about the terms under which this agreement they are entering into. It's arbitration. It's giving up their rights or the right to pursue that if other things come up as well. So, that completely makes the issue of satisfaction index almost null and void. The second thing you talked about, Dr. Pinnell, I don't know if Dr. Pinnell is familiar with predictive policing, if Dr. Pinnell is familiar with the suspicious activity reporting, if Dr. Pinnell is familiar with the other types of policing that are right now that are being enforced that create an environment of escalating situations which leads to bias as well. So it's not just about like one form of policing or stopping or something else. Last thing I'll speak about the body cameras, Commissioner Saltzman himself has voted against it and raised questions about policy because this department requires to review the footage before filing the report. I don't know if you knew that or not. That by itself creates an opportunity for manipulation. That by itself creates an opportunity. You're a psychologist. I don't know what you're a doctor for. But when somebody is looking at a footage and then they have the opportunity to view the footage and then write the report, I mean, you're giving the person unlimited amount of power
Thank you for your
to
comments.
manipulate that. So, so it's just, let's talk.
Okay. We do have a card for Riddell Jones, and we have a card from Mr. Wayne Spindler. Mr. Spindler? We'll have Mr. Spindler, and I'll check and see if your card's in.
So the magic word, 42 U.S.C. 1983, the black flag disinfectant of the defective police department. I didn't know about this wonderful thing. I didn't know you could stop bullshit this fucking fast. You can stop bullshit so fast with this number, you can't even imagine it. Because I go to places, I had a cop pull me over the other day. I said, 42 U.S.C. 1983. They said, I'm going to leave you off with a warning. Have a nice day, sir. 42 U.S.C. 1983. You're fucking around with federal law. And that's why you're writing this report. This report is simply pre-evidence cover-up bullshit. It's called systematic instruction and policy. You don't give a fuck about caring about what you do to people. This is simply an anticipation of litigation. So when you go to court after you arrest illegally the next non-Jew or the next black, or you shoot the next fucking homeless person, you're going to have to defend yourself from a lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. 1983. How do you do it?
We write reports and we have routinely trained our police officers in equitable and constitutional policing.
So that's all it is. This isn't about the people. This is an anticipation of your asses being hauled into court. And that's why Mr. Saltzman knows that. Mr. Saltzman knows what 42 U.S.C. 1983 is. And he knows why this report is bullshit and why he's going to vote no.
The final card, Prentice Jenkins.
I thought Prentice Jenkins, City Life newsletter publisher, activist since 1991. I figured we'd take a look at bias policing. Let's take a look at bias policing. Instead of just talking about it, we're going to take a look at it. Watch this.
Repeatedly sexually assaulting the women. The allegations go officers as James This is James and his partner or former partner, Luis Valenzuela, are charged with repeatedly sexually assaulting the women. The allegations go back more than 10 years. The officers are now arrested and charged.
10 years. Now that's bias policing. You know why that's bias policing? It took 10 years to get 2 rapist cops. So for 10 years, they raped black women. Now, I'll guarantee you, if they went into this attractive young lady's neighborhood and raped white women, they'd been caught 10 years ago. It took them 10 years. So the cops let 2 rapist cops rape black women in the black community for 10 years before they did anything about it. 10 freaking years of rape. We don't know how many women these cops raped. Yeah, and how many different precincts they did it in. And you know why? These women had gone in to complain to the police department. Guess what they did? Took their complaints, put them in the shredder. Shred it up. They're not going to take a complaint against the cops. You got cops who are, you can't have cops who continue to police cops and investigate cops. That's like having Bloods investigate Bloods and Crips investigate Crips and 18th Street investigate 18th Street. What kind of justice you think you're going to get there? 10 years these people kept, these scumbag cops raped women in the black community. And sure enough, nothing happened until 2015.
And we have no other comment cards on this item.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the department's report?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yes, I vote no.
So it's 4-1 in favor. Thank you.
We're now on item 4B. We have 2 comment cards. Sir, would you like to hear the item or just the cards?
Would any of my fellow commissioners like to hear? Okay, we can go right to the public comment on
We
this.
have the Red Chief Hunt and Wayne Spindler.
So this is item 4B.
Item 4B.
So the topic is the Fifth Amendment to Professional Services Agreement between the City of Los Angeles and G4S Secure Solutions for security guard services.
Okay, security guard services, was that like the guys who arrested me and put fuck white niggers on the ticket and they called them security for city council and Parks and Recreation meeting? Could anybody clarify that? Because they said on the report that it was security guards instead of LAPD. On the ticket it said the City of Los Angeles.
We don't have your arrest report, Ms.
Oh, you seen the ticket though before, correct? No. The one that says fuck white niggers too? And the reason why I say that, here's what I want to say. No more security guards should be hired as far as LAPD is concerned. It's already too many civil servant people. Let's keep it straight across the board. Either it's LAPD or it's nothing at all. If we have to hire a security guard agency or go out and contract a security guard agency, then why do we have LAPD, a police department? And when I say that, the GS4s, the GS, everybody wants to blame each other when a mistake is done. I noticed when the city settled with me for the $215,000 that they didn't really want to take responsibility, and they, in the newspaper article, it says some security agency did it, and in fact, their badge says LAPD or LA City Council Police or whatever the matter was. It was still the same as the ticket came out, says the city of Los Angeles, and it said fuck white niggers too, and that was one of the incidents about, you know, regarding the money. I had never seen a professional service agency put any racial epithets on tickets. So, I mean, just to say, do we want to go out and hire some extra security? No, we want to keep LAPD accountable for what they do and save the security for watching the buildings and things like that, not the people. And make sure that the city attorney doesn't have a way out. And that's became a big issue. And, you know, the last lawsuit that we're getting ready to file, now that we got it under control now, that we can name the police officers, we like to name the individuals because just like Wayne said, the 1942 USMAC, that's the only way you get your vast results when somebody's house or somebody's property or somebody has to be accountable for it. And that's what the federal courts do.
Wayne Spindler.
Well, you gotta go out there and hire more security. Security guard services for the Clan G4S Secure Solutions of Mississippi and Georgia. Yes, to go out and violate the Fifth Amendment rights using these professional services agreements. For all of these people, you got to be herding up on these buildings. And that's the reason why I got to go and I got to support this item. Now, I'm going to give a shout out. For example, the Nazi lowriders up in Lancaster have all been pre-approved to be hired as security guard services so we can violate the Fifth Amendment to all of these people here. So, yes, we definitely going to support it. One of the requirements also is wearing a hood. And that's why you got to wear a hood when you're in the security guard services. Now, police can't wear hoods, at least not publicly. But the security guards, they can wear a hood because they just independent contractors. So, for example, when all of these security guards, one of their weapons automatically goes off and you sue the city, well, the city comes in, the city attorney, Mark Fear, says, shit, nigga, we ain't responsible. It's our security guard services. They're an independent contractor, so you can't sue us under 42 U.S.C. 1983. You got to go to our private independent contractor. So you go to them, and what happens? They run to Wilmington, Delaware, and Security Guard Services files for federal bankruptcy protection, and you got one eye left, and you got $4 in your pocket. That's why this shit is unbelievable. Security Guard Services, what a bunch of fucking bullshit. Conspired with the Hebrew Caliphate. So I say to Mr. Saltzman, vote no on the item.
I don't have a card for you, sir, on this item.
It must not have been timely submitted. Do we have any further
We
questions?
have no other comment cards on this item.
Do I have a motion to approve this item?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. We're now on item number 5, public comment. We have 11 comment cards, sir. Would you like to do a 1 minute or two?
We'll give everyone the full 2 minutes.
Okay. The first 5 cards, Prentice Jenkins. Excuse me. Ted Hayes. Luke Wiegand, Marcus Brown, and Crystal Jones.
Prentice Jenkins, published a City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. I'd just like to revisit, Mr. Johnson, I can't speak after, once I put a card in, if they're already speaking, you can't speak, correct? I can't put a card in, is that what you're saying?
The cards have to be in before the item is over.
So even though they're speaking on the item, they have to be in before, and my card was in before it was over.
Right, mine too.
The officer told me I couldn't do it. I was talking to them while they were talking on the item. They brought my card back. How is that possible?
I will make sure that everyone is clear on the rules. For
Okay,
the next
thank
meeting.
you. All right. Thank you. I want to play something here. I've been talking about gay cops filling people up. And thank you, Red Chief Hunt. He played NWA's Fuck the Police. And in it, it says, I don't know if they fags or what, searching a nigga down and grabbing his nuts. That man wrote this in 1988. He had been assaulted. Ice Cube had been assaulted by a gay cop, and he put it in his lyrics. Because he never did anything that didn't happen to him. It didn't happen to his friends. They never rapped about that. They rapped about stuff that happened to him. Now, in 1988, I would have thought, oh, he's just making fun of cops. But I know what he's talking about now. He was assaulted by gay cops, tossed him up on the wall and grabbed his junk. Want to see if the stereotype is true, and he put it in his lyrics. 1988. I'm talking about it in 2016, and that man rapped about it in 1988. So we know it's happening.
Ted Hayes.
Bias policing, something personal. I'm a marked man. On the last two occasions I was in L.A. jail, they tried to kill me. Well, they're always trying to kill me. I'm a cancer survivor. I have no teeth. I have no saliva, so I cannot eat solid food. So when I was at Metropolitan Detention Center, they didn't beat me. I collapsed. When I was at 77th Street, they didn't beat me. I went to Wall Street for my walking against the Don't Walk sign, and I collapsed once again. Now, that is because Sherman Block collapsed, hit his head, and died. So when you fall down from your height, you might strike your head on something and be killed, or at least be seriously damaged. Now, the courts are the same. My last three appearances, my rap sheet is about thick as a telephone book, but no felonies, a lot of arrests for felonies, nothing like a felony. But anyway, when I was in court,
Sure.
I was in court because I read a riddle. And James Wood arrested me on a private person arrest for reading a riddle, and the judge found me guilty and gave me 136 days in jail for reading a riddle. So when you do these things to these people for their 2 minutes, it strikes me dearly. It really does, because I was in that position once before. Now, I was out the next day because the L.A. Times put my picture in the paper and all that sort of stuff and said, man goes to jail for 136 days for reading a riddle. And that judge is no longer on the bench. And I've been successful at getting 3 judges off the bench. Okay? So they don't mess with me anymore because they think I might get them fired.
Luke Wilgren. Followed by Marcus Brown and Crystal Jones.
Okay. Good morning. Where do I begin? Maybe with the way the public is being scolded for not reading a 360-page report within the week. Maybe with the way Mr. Saltzman, who has seen 9 of these reports come across, 9 of these types of reports, it's not the same report, but 9 of these types of reports commissioned by the police, said no more. Or should I begin with the way I was told to shut my mouth while I was in the lobby? that bothers me about this whole situation, the whole scenario. And, I'm not going to submit a complaint about it because, what's that? I'm not actually, I'm not sure that it would be sustained. I don't know if I trust the whole process. But here we are, is that the problem therein lies is the difference between the reality as it's observed on the street and the reality as it's entered into the police documents, the police files. We don't need a 360-page document to tell us what's going on. Young black men being wrestled to the ground and shot, couples being shot in the car at 3 a.m., mentally ill, beat up on the side of the freeway, young black mothers shot after stealing $80 from a pharmacy. I know that you tend to think up here sometimes that we are reactionary, but frankly, it's very terrifying when real estate developers, entertainment lawyers, and the mayor's friends are pontificating and adjudicating what ultimately eventually results in zero discipline. At the end of the day, you get the feeling that this body, these reports, these mediations, and this entire meeting are really impediments to justice. And I vote no confidence because ultimately we never had a vote in this. Now I'm going to, because I'm going to read this report because you guys threw down the gauntlet so disrespectfully. But
we look forward to having you back on April 12th too, when it's back on the agenda.
Marcus Brown.
Good morning.
In January, I think 30th, we attended an FBI meeting where there were many victims complaining of being wirelessly attacked with radio weapons. A lot of them were claiming of being raped, stalked 24/7, 7 days a week. The FBI said there are no laws on this type of weaponry, so any one of us could be attacked and there wouldn't be any consequences or anything. So we're trying to figure, why wouldn't you put a law on a weapon as vicious as a radio weapon could be to anybody out here? For one thing, you can't see it. For another thing, radio, I mean, you can communicate with a person as well as torture them at the same time. So you have people saying they're hearing voices, they're going for help, they're being labeled mentally ill, and nobody's even looking into the facts of this type of technology. I'm aware that it's probably way more deeper than this, but let's stick to the basics of the physical torture. I mean, you don't have a shield, you don't have anything. This stuff comes through steel, wall, water, concrete. I mean, exploding hearts, causing difficulty breathing, and raping women. What about the children? That's one of the main things. Like, they go to school every day with a radio low in their ear, concentrated on their skull. They can't tell us what's happening. And I mean, this is something that really needs to be paid attention to, and it doesn't make any sense why there's no laws on something like that. So it kind of seems premeditated, and it's just a big concern for me, my family, your family, and I mean, all electronics can be interfered, can be disrupted, system failure with this technology that's aimed at citizens. So I think you guys should think about that, man. And
Thank you.
Crystal Jones, followed by Yvonne Michelle Autry, Jeffrey Hall, the Red Chief, Jamie Garcia, Wayne Spindler, and Hamid Khan.
Crystal Jones. For the past year, we have been addressing the LAPD at your functions, barbecues. We've been all over City Hall trying to let them know about wireless technology and how it's being weaponized, how there are patents on LED screens, like all of these TVs we have in our homes, that our government is using to send frequencies through to enhance emotion, to make people, they're hiding behind mental health, they're hiding behind natural physical disease, and we would think that the LAPD would be one of the top agencies that would like to know exactly what's going on, because you have so many police out here quick to pull out their gun and shoot somebody because they moved the wrong way. And it's really your LAPD police department, you guys who are on the street, policing our street. You have these people out here that are going through a tremendous amount of torment, and nothing's being done about that. We've addressed you so many different times and have heard absolutely nothing back from you, trying to find out exactly what's going on. What type of technology is really being used to hurt and enhance both the LA Police Department and these people on the street? And like he said, women, children are getting raped, murdered. They're hiding behind heart attacks, brain aneurysm, mental health. And you guys are just shooting and killing these people who are trying to get help. Aaron Alexis was not crazy. He was a victim. And these are the type of people that you have out here. You want to talk about gangbangers and gang activity, but you have a technology that's sitting on top of people who are living in violent neighborhoods and enhancing everything that they're going through, making it harder for you to actually police these streets in a way that is conducive to everybody. We're all out here. We are in fear of our life from the technology that's being used out here, and you guys ought to be in fear for your life because it's being used on people who might have a small problem, but
Thank you
it's
for
making
your
it harder
comments.
for you guys to do your job effectively. Wouldn't you want us to be able to come in here to your commission meeting and say thank you?
Okay, thank
you
you.
for doing a
Thank
good
you.
job and looking out for the public.
Yvonne Michelle Autry.
I thank God for those testimonies because, again, you can't label us all crack addicts, crazy, manic depressive, people that are hallucinating, because more and more people are testifying to frequencies, microwaves, pendulums, magnets, electromagnetic wavelengths that are being used to sexually harass, sexually abuse people, causing not just aneurysms and strokes and heart attacks, but invasive damage to the spinal column. I know because I'm a licensed and certified Japanese shiatsu acupressure specialist, and they think it's organic. It is not organic. Whether it's the LAPD, the paramilitary, Masons, mafia, whoever is perpetrating, you are aware, because this is the new age technology to debilitate people, so not only do they generate revenue for the pharmaceutical industry, but also to murder people without there being any evidence of the crime. And when we speak about it, we're labeled, oh, you're overreacting or you're hallucinating. So you know what you're perpetrating to eliminate the black people that the police officers are not shooting in the back or shooting in the head after that they have been handcuffs. And for the black women, okay, these are just a few of the black women that were murdered by police officers or undercover police officers, or some of them were black men that had probably been socialized as pedigree house Negroes to hate black women because we do continue to speak out. We're not as submissive as the white female or the Latina or Asian female. I'm not racist, but this is just the brainwashing, a part of this Willie Lynch, which is used to further divide and to annihilate our people. So I'd like to commemorate and draw attention to these Black Lives That Matter as all lives matter. And I'd like to speak on the videos. Whenever I have been attacked, usually by white women, there was one Latina named Deborah Vargas who attacked me and then reversed the culpability. The videos only showed my reacting. So I do not have confidence in even these videos that you're proposing. How is that going to be a panacea when they can further be altered or fabricated in the effort of vindicating or in justifying uses of excessive force or police brutality, whatever, profiling or whatever it is you're trying to cover up? So I really don't find that a panacea, nor does it increase my security or any faith that I've never had with your department. So again, I want to draw attention to these murders, and I continue to, why I'd like to encourage you to begin to even posture as if you're resolving the DNA kits. They continue to expire, mostly, again, I think homeless people and economically challenged people, black women that have been victims of some type of smear campaigning. Again, do not reverse the culpability in incriminating the whistleblowers or the witnesses to whatever it is the government or the police department is trying to cover up. because we're coming together and we will expose you.
Thank you for
Jeffrey
your comment.
Hall.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeffrey Hall.
Good afternoon.
And I'm a resident of Los Angeles, West Side kid, never had any problems. But it's funny, I couldn't define what I'm experiencing until I heard these people talk about this. I lived in an area called Ladera Heights. I had a gentleman that I met one time, shook his hand, that was stalking me, robbed my house, vandalized my car. I then moved to Leimert Park. Same thing. I have filed I finally got a restraining order violation in LA City, filed 4 restraining order violations in there. I work at a Beverly Hills real estate firm, have many celebrity clients. He has hacked into my email. He is threatening me. He has ruined my life. I have moved 5 times. I'm now staying at a hotel in Duarte. Whatever this stalking is, I cannot even get the Southwest Division. I've written the captain. I've been assigned to detectives that are showing up. The man sent me a thing of stalking. I sent everybody here a package last week defining who I am in the emails. They will not even communicate with me. I went to the DA's office. The DA said, we don't understand why Southwest Division will not put all 4 of these cases together. They sent 1 case. I go in there so much, these other officers said, we know this. I had another detective look at another detective's case and say, I don't know why he won't upgrade this to a stalking charge so it won't be so frivolous. That detective sent me something defining stalking. I have lost my job. I can't work. Every time something happens, his car accident was 2 days after this man threatened to hinder my vehicle after I filed 2 stalking reports. The bottom line is this: I have now become a volunteer because I don't want to have a salty disposition. The police have been amazing. I'm not one of these people that think the police are so awful. There are good people and bad people everywhere. But what I'm saying is I need somebody to take 10 minutes. I know where this man lives. When the sheriffs knock this man's door, he refuses to let them in. There are 27 cases, or rather 40 cases, of the sheriff knocking at this man's door and him just saying, you can't come in. I've hired a private investigator. This man is a criminal. 3 social security numbers, 5 aliases. When you look him up, it says criminal. Why can't I get somebody to knock at this man's door? He's doing the same thing to me. I've now spoken to Detective Malachi and some other people that have decided, the captain of the Hollywood division I met last week, to be proactive. I just want somebody, we know this is happening, and this man also is threatening other people.
All right, thank you for your comments, and I know I did see the materials you sent over, so thank you.
Could I just ask, how does that follow-up process happen?
We will forward it to the department, and I'll follow up.
The Red Chief.
He just doesn't know Chief William Scott. Anyways, I want to call upon all the commissioners and things like that to put a stop to what's going on. I think that our detectives and everybody need to be DNA tested for the same crimes that we just arrested those 2 cops for. I think it's about time that we start doing it in the department. I think that it should be, just like Brinkus Jenkins said, 10 years before they got found out. But I think they should be held to the same standards that all cops should be DNA tested. So if they have committed a crime, we can go after them as well, and it doesn't take 10 years. Number 2, I'd like to comment on what he said again. Brinkus Jenkins said that when trying to turn into a card on subject number 3, and we were on subject number 3, they wouldn't allow me. And this is not the first time this has happened. I'm a gadfly down here. I know what the 1948 or 1983 USC 42, US 42, you know what I'm saying? Because I use it a lot. I think the pen is more powerful than anything else. But I think that what we come to now is with all the police and that are on TV for raping and killing people and things like that, or for what we haven't found out, it could be a lot of our police officers. So that I'm asking that at this, that the commissioners draw up a draft to say that all LAPD people be DNA tested so we can have their DNA if they become a part of a Los Angeles Police Department, because we might find some killers in there and we might find some other things that's going on that we haven't been aware of, because they're just as guilty as just the public. And I don't want that to go unheard and things like that. Matt, if you can, please correct the Brown Act down here and get everything straight down here. Pretty much everything's gone on for it. Look forward to me coming and moving in with you. I'm looking forward to that.
Jamie Garcia.
Good morning. So I wanted to go back to the statement that Saltzman made about how the report, the bias policing report, isn't credible. So we're looking at, 0 sustained, and instead of just looking at the process and the legal way of trying to sustain a complaint, we need to also look at the human impact. So, and this brings me back to a point that I think my colleague Hamid Khan was trying to raise. When we think about how police officers are trained in the SAR program, it's observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning of criminal or terrorist behavior. So they're looking at you, and reasonable indication by the Office of Director of National Intelligence is defined as an articulable concern. So it's presumptive policing, it's based on implicit bias, but here we are now acknowledging that there's a large problem with implicit bias that we are unable to discover. We're unable to figure out if it's happening, if it's not happening, how are we going to handle it, how do we provide a legal standard for it. So in some ways, I don't think the training is enough because we're talking about moving a human person beyond their bias and even trying to get to that point while they have a gun, while they're able to open up these files. So then I go back to what is the human impact of acknowledging that there is this large problem. So we can't take away those files. They're already in the information sharing environment. There are FBI files opened up on people already. We can't bring back the lives that have been lost. So that's a serious problem. And I don't think that, creating more reports will actually solve this problem because, for Christ's sakes, 3 years ago, there was a consent decree. So how many reports were generated from there, and how much more data do we actually need to acknowledge that this system isn't working? More public safety isn't being developed. So I just want to really kind of just call that out and again say that it's flawed by design, and also to state that this same presumptive policing is actually moving into our schools. So now we're looking at children being implicated as well for having these supposed imposed criminal or terrorist behaviors, or even speaking out against the government. So this is serious. This is very serious.
Thank you for your comments.
Wayne Spindler, followed by Hamid Khan.
So, now we're back again, in the words of Sheila Kuehl.
And to destroy Israel. You scumbag, you Sheila Kuehl, you anti-Semitic scumbag. Listen, you asshole! I am a Jew. My mother was a Jew. I don't get it. You say that again? I have to talk. I want order in here.
That's right. That's right. The Latina bitch wants order. Yes, that's the secret. If your mother's not a Jew, you're in trouble. You're going to be killed in the city unless you get lawyers. But now, Saturday Night Live. Somebody sent me a copy of their latest edition. People wearing hoods and swastikas on Saturday Night Live. Thank you very much, Larry David. Because Larry David loves what I do. Pay me a royalty check, Larry David, por favor. Because now they're writing fucking material on Saturday Night Live based on my hood. Isn't that wonderful? And why did it happen? Because you keep fucking with me. You don't let me work. Like Michael Hunt can't work. All I wanted to do was work. But you can't let me work. No. I have to stand here and play shit like this and go to meetings. While I'm up in my mountain fucking ranch. The county's washing away my road. I'm going to go there next. I'm going to debut the hood live over there at the fucking county board meeting. Fuck them. That's what I'm going to do. Fuck the police. Fuck the DA. Fuck the city attorney. Fuck the police commission. Fuck the mayor. Because that's all it is. It's all bullshit. Because we go around a long time and we don't understand. Why are we getting pulled over? Why is the car getting towed away? Why are we getting all of these fucking fees? And then we got to go and get arrested. We got to get fucked with beyond repair. FUBAR. So that's why I'm here. Now they're playing it on Saturday Night Live. Pay me some royalties, Mr. David.
Hamid Khan.
I wanted to invite you all to an event that's taking place on March 19th, which is a Saturday from 11 o'clock till 1:30. This is at the LA Mission College. This is for the first time in LA, maybe in the country, that a city agency, and it's the City Human Relations Commission, that's holding a hearing on the suspicious activity reporting program and gang injunctions. It took us about 3 years to get there, but they're doing that. So it's from 11 to 1:30. It's going to be a community event. It's going to be an event that the Human Relations Commission is putting up. There'll be a panel of experts and community testimonies. And then you'll get to see as to what some of the other folks have spoken about, the kind of policing that we are looking at. And as Jamie Garcia was talking about speculative policing, if you thought that is what's going on, wait till we start looking at that. Now they are actually tracking Facebook to look at emojis. That what sort of emojis are people sending to people that can show their emotional state as well. A lot of this seems really science fiction, but in reality this is happening. Predictive algorithms, predictive policing, suspicious activity reporting, the tracking through trapwire, Stingray, digital DRTs, various other technologies, tracking and tracing and following is a reality. This is a lived experience that we all have. Files are being opened, housed in fusion centers, given to joint terrorism task forces, private contractors having access to this thing, pre-employment checks, people's fingerprints are being shown up, young women going to Brentwood Art School, they are being followed, their names are put into joint terrorism task forces. So the question here is that you, as a front line, supposedly as custodians of public trust, how seriously are you taking this thing? I mean, are you taking this as a joke? Are you taking this as science fiction? Are you taking this completely as to dismiss something? Or are you taking it that people are bringing these things to you, to your attention every day, every week? So come to the event. That if you want to see some more stuff, and as far as Matt Johnson, we'll be sending you the response, and we'll be sending the dates and the location as well in time.
Great. Thank you for your comments.
There are no other public comment cards. We are now on item number 6. We have 3 cards on item number 6. We have Prentice Jenkins, Ted Hayes, and Wayne Spindler.
Prentice Jenkins, publisher City Life newsletter, activist since 1991. Employee performance evaluation, dismissals, discipline, and public employees' performance. I don't know if you taking a look at some of your cops out there and their employee performance. I told the chief a few months ago, after the officer touched my genitals with the wand, that I believe that, yeah, you're right, Chief, I don't believe he intentionally did it. Then I went to 3 different buildings with wands, courthouse, police station, and supervisors. They checked me with the wand, never hit my genitals once, so I don't believe it. I believe that cop actually tried to touch my genitals. As I'm in here speaking about cops touching people's genitals, he actually touched mine out there. So I'm going to file a complaint on that, even though it was a while back. You're looking at Government Code 54957 as a condition to holding. Subject to paragraph, this chapter shall not be construed to prevent the legislative body of a local agency from holding closed sessions during a regular or special meeting to consider the appointment, employment, evaluation, or performance discipline or dismissal of public employees, or to hear complaints or charges brought against the employee by another person or employee unless the employee requests a public session. What my esteemed colleague, Red Chief Hunt, said, that's brilliant. Swab all the cops and then put them in a database. See what you get, what type of hits you get. It's brilliant. No one's ever thought about that before. You swab the cops. You swabbed Stephanie Lazarus and caught her 23 years ago.
Ted Hayes.
this appears to be contagious fire. Now, maybe not. Most people don't understand what an assault weapon is. An assault weapon is one that you use when you're at the bottom of the hill and the enemy is at the top of the hill, and you have a weapon that fires multiple rounds real rapidly to keep them pinned down. Marine Corps, I was a Marine. The reason the Marines are so successful is because they're told to keep your head up and keep aiming and firing and squeeze off your rounds. Don't be excited by the firefight. Head up, aim, squeeze off your rounds. An M16 only holds 8 lousy bullets. So, contagious fire, maybe not. Maybe they were keeping the person pinned down, perhaps. But there is such a thing as contagious fire, and we've witnessed that. But I think it would be interesting to find out whether or not officers are trained to utilize contagious fire. Everybody open up, keep the subject pinned down. And another thing is, I found out that many Marines are afraid of guns. And many police officers also. One of the difficult things the department has is people getting on a firing range and qualifying. Some people just hate that firing range. They don't qualify. In many instances, officers might shoot multiple rounds because they can't be confident of firing correctly and accurately. So this may be contagious fire when you got 7 officers firing at one time. It's interesting to find out when you interview them what they were thinking, how they're responding, and whether their training prompted them to fire in this manner.
My favorite subject, OIS, shooting time. Officer and boob, shooting. That's right, hooty hoop to the shooting. That's right. This is the gangster section of the meeting. We have a sergeant who turned into a gangster, 1 police officer, 3 who wants to be a sergeant gangster, and 5 little police officer 2s. So let's go ahead and see. Are we going to discipline, dismiss, release the public employee performance evaluation? Well, in closed session, when you put on your hoods, such as I have, available on eBay, you'll be able to see that these officers will be commended if they violated the 4th Amendment and 5th Amendment rights, especially of the non-Hebrew of us. So they will be commended. But out here, they will be scorned. Bad police officer. Bad. Why does one cop start shooting and all the rest pull their guns out and fire at anybody without a badge? Not but inside where you have the catered lunch. And again, it is difficult to wear hoods and eat at the same time. I'm working on that problem. And you'll see that these cops are going to be commended for violating the civil rights, especially that pesky 42 U.S.C. 1983 shit. But out here, everybody cares. But inside the closed session, yes, the closed session is where everybody takes off their hoods for a moment and gets real, gets ghetto-like, and say, I know I wear a hood, but let's take off our hoods and let's admit we'd like to blast all these cocksuckers. We're tired of these cocksuckers coming into these meetings. I wish we could kill every one of these public speaker cocksuckers. Then the meeting is over and everybody leaves and they say, yes, I protect the rights of the minorities.
There are no other public comment cards. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss item number 6A1 in accordance to Government Code 54957.
Were you up there, Maria? Huh? Were you up there? Yeah. Me too.
It was so fast. What?
Right.
No, I know.
Her new thing is she's second suing the university.
Okay. We are back in open. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item number 6A1 was discussed, and the Chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No, sir.
We are adjourned.
All right. Excellent. 12:17. Beautiful.
Shocking one for those.
The adjournment.
Hi, I'm Christy Odom in Los Feliz. You're watching LA City View, Channel 35. Our city, our channel. Would you like a mustache with that?
Can the massive water demands of a self-contained community be environmentally friendly?
Can expanding the number of